John, thank you again so much for joining the show today.
Not a problem.
What I thought we could do is we'll start a bit about your history in retail.
One of the things I thought I would start off by saying is that one of the things about reinventing businesses, etc., is also about reinventing yourself. And because they are two things that are closely aligned, that people can, come across challenges in their lives, etc. And my dad was born in 1906. He was 46 when I was born. He had a really interesting career growing up in Western Queensland, doing droving, etc. Then he started in menswear stores and different other things. Although when the cracker gold rush started, he went out there with a general store and also took some changes in life with the Depression, where he decided get out of menswear and other things and get into providing food, which was absolutely essential. But he had a very unhappy marriage. He made a lot of money. When the war came along, he joined up, became one of the first commandos, and he actually was quite depressed at the time and didn't care if he didn't come back. And a lot of the commandos, well, they were all told that their chances of coming back were very, very slim indeed. Anyway, he did make it, came back from the war, found that his first wife had cleared off with somebody else. And you might say he was a bit down in the dumps. Yeah, he was well and truly depressed. But he moved to Sydney, stayed with his sister in Bondi, and met my mum, who was 22 years younger than him. And literally from 1946, so he's 40 years of age, he restarted life and reinvented himself. And he then went on to different other jobs, but the one that he really loved doing and also created some great innovative ideas was joining a company called Ruben F Scarfs. And he and Ruben became very close friends. But a really interesting part that linked his life there with the army and the commandos is that one of the youngest guys, because he was apparently the oldest in the commandos, and this other guy, Alan Huntington, right at the youngest end of it. Anyway, Alan's family had a suit manufacturing organisation. Dad working at Ruben Scarfs, and he came up with this idea that instead of buying through wholesalers, that was so much about the industry at that time in retail, you didn't have the close relationships that there are today with the manufacturers. So he came up with the idea, well, why don't we buy the fabric directly from the woolen mills, John Foster, etc., and then Alan's factory could make it and do it at a lot cheaper price to bring into store. Now, people said, well, this is great. We can sell them so much cheaper. And Dad said, no, we shouldn't do that. It just devalues the product. We keep the product at the same price as elsewhere, other retailers, but what we'll do is give another suit away for free, or sports coat, trousers, shoes, socks, etc. And it went absolute gangbusters and did two things. One, it grew that business enormously. Number two, though, it really started to put the first nail in the coffin of wholesaling, because other retailers thought, why are we dealing through these wholesalers who are making, a margin on the way through? So, it was a complete change that he created within the industry on two fronts. The other thing that was, I guess you could say, innovative at the time is that, yes, they would carry a range of shoes in stock. And I just use that as one example, or shirts from a company called Paramount or Whitmont. Anyway, with this two suits for the suit plus the other accessories, he would go to people like Paramount or McMurtry Shoes and buy all their ends of ranges at a much reduced price. And of course, if a salesman was able to give one of those away rather than the fully priced product, they got a bit of extra commission.
That's smart.
Same quality product.
Yeah. It's just end of line.
And that relates to something I did later on in life. Anyway, I went to work with my dad from the age of 8. being much older than me,
Yeah.
he wasn't really into taking the school sports and whatever. And also, we lived on acres out at Moorebank, and where I could even occasionally ride my horse to school at Chipping Norton, something you couldn't do today.
Yeah.
But I was my dad's offsider, and I really took to business. And so on Saturday mornings from the age of 8, I'd go into there. School holidays, particularly the Royal Easter Show, I'd go in there with a microphone and sell the details of aquarising on the suits, which was the 3M product,
Oh, okay.
Scotch
Like a
Guard,
Scotch Guard, was it?
etc.,
Ah,
which
right.
Dad negotiated exclusive rights for Australia.
Wow.
So, yeah, but the
Amazing.
Scarf organisation let that go at some other time after Dad had retired.
Mm.
Anyway, so my first thing into retail, etc., was with this entrepreneurial dad who unfortunately did suffer from manic depression, or now bipolar. So during the good times, he could take on the world. During the bad times, wouldn't want to get out of bed. But anyway, it was a fabulous time. But as I said, other kids on school holidays, go off to camps, whatever. What did I do? I'd go and work in the stores. So, which led me to, after I became disillusioned after one term at university following high school, I'm going to go into retail with Dad. Went into there, ended up as a store manager at 20, and I started my own little bit of entrepreneurship and doing designing of menswear, etc. But I also started fashion shows and tied up with a local ladies' wear organisation.
Right.
And so I'd do the MC and then get guys, some of our staff involved to do the men's modelling, and the Bell Star ladies would get the girls in. And it was a cracker, absolute great way of lifting brand, etc. However, the downside was when you work for somebody as a father, you can become overtaken by their image. And I had to get out after a couple of years because I was never going to be John. I was always going to be Con's son.
Yeah.
So that time I joined Grace Brothers, and I was very lucky. Michael Grace was the HR director at the time.
Right.
And I then started on a journey holding on to the shirt tails of a guy called Roger Corbet, who was my first real boss after orientation. We opened up Warringah Mall store, and I learned a lot off Roger. Most of my time, my 10 years with Grace Brothers, was working with Roger, and what a great time that was. An important part for people to think about. You see department stores today, and they're literally only fashion stores. You know, that's it, menswear, ladies wear, kids wear, etc. Back in that time, we had hardware, records. The range of Manchester was just fantastic. Toys, etc. A supermarket. So half of the ground floor of today's Grace Brothers Warringah Mall was a supermarket. But over a period of time, what happened? We had consultants come in who said, "Oh no, you can get much better return per square foot by getting rid of this, getting rid of that." And I think that was really the start of the downfall of department stores, because they just started to get rid of this, get rid of that, and just changed. In fact, what was the department store of then is now the Westfields of today.
Yeah, so true,
and
isn't
an
it?
interesting
It's interesting.
story is Mr. Lowe bought or convinced the Grace Brothers board to sell their stores to him.
Yeah, right.
Which were Chatswood. Oh, well, they weren't just stores. I mean,
they were massive.
There was Chatswood, Parramatta, Bondi, a number of them. So they were, if you like, the Westfields of the time. But
That's
Frank
right.
Lowe, no,
Yeah, Frank Lowe.
you guys should stick to retailing. I'll do the real estate bit. Anyway, I spent 10 great years in Grace Brothers. They were very entrepreneurial. We had fashion parades all the time. I, being a bit of an MC and not afraid of a microphone, I had some terrific times interviewing a number of international celebrities, etc.
That's
And
great.
so if something new came to town, say there was a new book release or whatever, then we'd have them in store. A whole lot of stuff that was there.
Amazing.
So, and it was very, very customer focused. The We Care campaign, whatever it needs for customers. One of the things that I did when I was merchandise manager at Chatswood store was actually introduce, go back to fashion parades for ladies' underwear,
Right. Okay.
which caused quite a sensation.
I bet it did.
Oh, in those days, let me tell you.
Was it
Old B.A.
razzmatazz
Grace
and all
got
that kind of thing, or was it?
um, they were quite revealing, and B.A. Grace had a number of letters on his desk. Because Chatswood was the number one store, then, of course, it really grabbed the headlines. So when this young merchandise manager decided to start these fashion parades with ladies' underwear, a little bit of infamy with the bosses. Anyway, it all worked out. It worked out really well. I then went into the buying offices and in ladies' wear, ladies' fashions. And it was interesting. My first wife was pregnant at the time, and she couldn't find a decent maternity wear anywhere. I'm thinking, hang on, I'm the buying controller for women's fashions, and my wife can't get anything in our stores. So
time to fix that problem.
yeah, so hence started a maternity wear department, which ended up being the highest gross profit department in Grace Brothers.
Wow.
And then also recognised an area of the market. And a guy called Carl Dowd from Clothing Company came up with this idea of the Maggie T range. So not only did we launch this maternity, but I love the fact that we were going to then get into this other larger size market spearheaded by Maggie T brand. And Maggie was absolutely fantastic to work with. And again, ladies really it took off enormously. One of the great lessons from that is that if you can make a lady feel good about herself, then she will pay a right price, and it won't need to be discounted or whatever else. It's really, really good quality. What
Maintain
they want
those margins
is something that is going to make them feel good.
Yep.
And hence the success of that. Unfortunately, Grace Brothers then were going into a merger with Myer. Now, Myer, I had a fair bit to do with their buying people, the buying office, because we would do strategic buys internationally, etc., go on trips to Hong Kong, etc., together. Did not like the culture. We were very much working with manufacturers, long-term relationship.
Yep.
They were about, do you know who I am?
No, yeah, right. Yeah.
You know, and I have seen them do some, or I had seen
Rather
them
than
those times do some terrible things. So I decided, no, I'm out of here. This is not right.
Toxic.
And my father said something very important to me one day. He said, son, if you ever wake up in the morning and you're not happy going to work, buy the paper and find another job.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Yeah,
it's
100%.
very, very
Why are
true.
you still there for? Yeah.
And anyway, I got a big move into going from fashions, etc., to Sharp Corporation in consumer electronics.
Yep.
And that was my first introduction of going into a company where someone, and by the way, senior management deliberately brought me in as a fresh set of eyes because they understood that the industry as a whole was quite incestuous. Nothing's changed. Everybody does the same sort of stuff.
Yep.
It's just same old, you know, every day of the week. What was that great movie with Bill Murray? Groundhog Day?
Groundhog Day, yeah.
Just repeat the same stuff. So, but it was my first experience of somebody saying to me, now, John, what you need to understand is this business is different. Say, oh, really? Say, oh, so do you have customers? Yeah. Marketing? Yeah. HR? Yeah. I went through half a dozen different things. Oh, so it's really different. And they just look at you like, well, no, you just don't understand. Anyway, Sharp was great. We were down about 4 or 5 as far as the brand in the marketplace.
Right.
Had absolutely fantastic product, and we were number one in microwave. Now, one of the things, and being in the marketing role for the organisation, come up with something different. Well, we had an ad agency who was very creative, and they came up with an idea for selling videos, which was, or video players, of course, which was to give away a video called The History of Cricket, and it was narrated by Ian Chappell. Up until the Thriller video by Michael Jackson, it was the number one selling video in Australia. But what it also did, really importantly, was lift the brand.
Yeah.
And lift the image of the brand, etc.
Yeah, it creates a nice association.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just as an aside to that, previously we'd had Bernard King pushing microwaves, and we had Greg Chappell pushing TVs and audio. And we did a survey of customers, and we said, do you know the products that these people are pushed by? Yeah. Do you know the brand? No. And it's where sometimes a personality can be bigger than the brand that they're promoting.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I said goodbye to them. And I've forgotten his name now, the great management consultant. Anyway, he was Greg Chappell as one as his. And Harry, nearly remembered it. He rang me and abused me. Do you know what you've done? Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we moved on.
Yeah.
The best thing, though, was to stand back and look in this industry and say, what can we do something different? And what I found was that where retailers in themselves, in the fashion industry, were doing these big sales and everything else, Christmas, but also you'll remember the New Year's sales, etc.
Yeah.
The whole consumer electronic industry was asleep. And everyone said, when I started to ask questions, they'd say, oh, no, nothing happens. Nothing happens. So anyway, I went to the managing director and my boss and said, look, I've got this crazy idea that we should go out there with a major campaign in January. Oh, but nobody ever does it. I said, well, look, I've got this, as I said, crazy idea. I believe that I can do some closeout buying of products that customers really love, like Corningware for microwaves, but a little bit of a left field approach was things like champagne glasses with a TV or Scotch glasses, and I'm talking crystal, right? Scotch glasses with a video. Oh, how are you going to pay for this and do it? I said, well, there's an interesting thing. All of our products at that time had 30% sales tax. All this stuff doesn't. Yeah, okay. I said, well, let's say something retails for $45, but I've only paid $15. I say, yeah. Well, what we can do is we can charge the retailer $45 for that product, but we will give them a $45 rebate on the TV or the video. And 30% is pretty much $15. So the rebate we got off the government in the sales tax paid for the product. And we launched in the January. It went absolute gangbusters because everybody else was asleep.
Yeah.
And again,
and you had something great in the market. It's what people sort of the association with the two products. They're complementary.
Yeah,
they go really well together.
Yeah, you sit and have a scotch while you're watching your TV with your new Sharp video as well.
Yeah, exactly. While Mum's using the microwave and got some free Corningware.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mate, you got
it covered. And it was all top quality.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Product, which is important. Yeah. But again, it really lifted our brand and positioning in the marketplace. It really along with the quality of our product and our other work, etc., took us to an equal number one in the market, along with Panasonic. Which
also,
was
your brand recall would have been much higher, John, too. I'm just assuming here, obviously, but you're not, as you said in the first instance, your association with or your affiliation with the person promoting the brand became sort of overshadowed your brand. But here you've got a representation of a really high quality product, but there's no real. I mean, Corningware obviously is a brand, but they're so far apart from each other. Like there's real. You're from a brand positioning point of view, your recall on your brand is going to be really quite high.
Yeah, and it was.
Yeah.
And if we'd have given away cheap, unbranded glassware or cookware or whatever else,
had the reverse effect, wouldn't it?
Correct. But it was also interesting. We literally cleaned out the warehouse with container loads of this stuff. And obviously the boys in the warehouse thinking, what are we doing with all this stuff? Anyway, it was a real game changer.
Yep.
Move on a number of years, and I really needed to make another change because I'd hit a glass ceiling. And the glass ceiling was in a Japanese company, even though I'd spent a couple of years learning the language, etc. I was basically told, look, John, we'll pay you whatever we need to keep you, but you're a gaijin, you're an alien. You're not going to go any further within the organisation, and you're certainly not going to get an international transfer, which I'd been asking for. So that then led me to joining a guy called Jack Cowan at Hungry Jack's. A bit of an interesting story, again, this industry's business, but did some promotional campaigns there that really lifted it.
Yeah, right.
But a few things happened, including a very, very close mate of mine coming along and saying, hey, I want you to join me as managing director of a business I've bought. I said, yeah, what's that? And he said, Domino's Pizza. I said, oh, okay. But I said, Chris, you don't know anything about the food market. And he said, no, that's where you come in. I said, oh, okay. So we worked together for a couple of years. But the unfortunate thing is that the relationship soured relative to things that he did. And it caught me in a maelstrom effect where I lost everything.
Right.
So the interesting part about this is that I was 40 at the time.
Wow. Yeah.
The good thing after I extracted myself out of that was that I joined Thorn EMI Rentals and started my journey with radio rentals. But during 1992, I turned 40 and I went broke and my dad died.
Oh, gosh.
And I got terribly depressed because I'd lost everything. I trusted someone who I thought was my best mate. They sold me down the river. And it was a dreadful time. What saved me? Thinking about my dad.
Oh, yeah.
At 40 years of age, he came back from the war and started again and reinvented himself. If my dad could do it, I could do it. And a very big object lesson. And look,
that's a great lesson.
People go through very, very dark days, etc.
Yes, yeah, they do.
But it was good that I also had a couple of close mates, one in particular, who really stood beside me, gave me support, etc.
Yep.
And then moved forward from there. Anyway, getting back to Thorn and radio rentals, I joined that organisation on a recommendation. And one of the first things was going in there and looking at the business and saying, oh, okay, put on the entrepreneurial hat. What about this? What about that? Yeah. And I met a couple of guys, one called Ken Wolfendale and another one, Ian Simpson, who unfortunately has passed. And I'd go up to these guys who are very long-serving and say, hey, what about this as an idea? No, it won't work. I thought, why not? I tried that in 86. Well, why didn't it work? Because of this. And then I'd go to them and I'd say, hey, boys, what about this? Oh, yeah, that'll work. Oh, why aren't we doing it now? Oh, there's this new marketing person that came in 83. And the one thing you learn about marketing people and CEOs, etc., when they move into a new company,
Yeah.
what's the first thing they've got to? They've got to change something. It's like they've got to
Yeah.
put their initials in the sand or P in the corner.
Yeah.
You know,
100% they do. Yeah. I've
oh,
experienced it.
the number of times
Mm.
I walk into a supermarket and I see a brand change and new
Mm.
packaging and everything else. I was thinking, I'll bet there's been a change at head office.
Oh, and you're probably spot on. You're probably 100% right every time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just crazy. But
Mm.
what I learned from my dad is never expect anybody to do a job you wouldn't do, including cleaning the toilets.
Yeah.
And number two, talk to the people at the front end of the business and find
Yeah.
out, really dig into their knowledge and experience and everything else. So anyway, with these two guys, I called them into my office one day and I said, I need a favour. And they said, what? I said, can you go and lock yourselves in the boardroom and write down everything that's worked and everything that hasn't worked? I said, I'm tired of asking you guys
One by one.
one by one. Tell me what's the good and the bad.
And I'll stop asking.
That taught me an enormous amount. I mean, my learning curve just shortened significantly.
Yeah, yeah.
But there was also another thing. We went through and we did, SWOT analysis, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And what was one of the threats to us and one of our major competitors, etc., were these people renting second-hand product, old product, at cheaper prices in the marketplace. And I said, but where do they get that product from? And they said, from us. I said, what? I said, yeah.
Yeah.
They said, see, what happens is we have a budget for sale of end of year or end of life product.
Yeah.
So when something becomes zero written down value after depreciation, we sell it off and we might get $150 for it. And that goes to the bottom line profit. I said, yeah, but we're feeding competitors. They said, yeah. So what I then came up with was a second brand, which was ReadyHire. And what it was, and I set a lady into it by the name of Robin McEwen, and she did an absolute cracker of a job with that brand. It's probably the only brand I've ever seen have, or any business, to see have an infinite return on capital employed, because all the product that we transferred into there was all the written down value product that we would have sold off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when they take a first month's rent up front, etc., even if people cleared off with it, I mean, we'd only have to rent it out for a couple of months, say 3 months, plus the first month that they've paid. And we've already got more than what we would have sold it to for these other people to be competitors.
Yeah. I mean, amazing, isn't it? I mean, what a turnaround.
And it just went gangbusters. Now,
you essentially put the other business out of business overnight with that one decision. I said you essentially put the other business out of business overnight because you cut their supply.
Yeah. And I got some very nasty phone calls.
Yeah.
A few times I was looking over my shoulders. You have destroyed my business. Yeah, sorry about that.
There's no friends in business, as they say sometimes, you got to, look after your people.
Anyway, with that, so what we had, 2-brand strategy, which I'm a great believer in, as long as you position it correctly. So we had Radio Rentals as the senior brand, if you like. And if anyone was rejected from Radio Rentals, they'd get a phone call from somebody from ReadyHire. Hey, have you ever thought about renting? Well, I have, but those mongrels at Radio Rentals wouldn't deal with me. Well, we will.
Yeah. So you just broadened your net massively. I mean, essentially, there's no way they could not be a customer.
Dealing with people who are really doing it tough.
Yeah.
And if you set an expectation for people and say, look, you're in this difficult situation, you've got really, really bad credit, Radio Rentals won't touch you, but we'll give you a go. But you got to set expectations. And Robin and her team were extremely good at that. The second thing was to create a brand called RentTryBuy.
Yep.
Everything that I'd heard was that and with the price of consumer electronics going down, that you needed to consider that people wanted ownership.
Yeah.
So we started RentTryBuy, and again, it went absolutely gangbusters. Now, in a period of time from 1992 to 1996, we went from $9 million worth of EBIT to around $25 million worth of EBIT. 4 years,
Sensational.
not too bad.
Yep.
And we won 2 worldwide awards for best business for Thorn EMI worldwide. Again,
Amazing.
pretty good. And we were really flying. The interesting thing, though, is that we get to 95, 96, and the worldwide board wouldn't let us reinvent again, because myself and some of the other country heads were saying, we just can't keep doing this rent to rent. We have to make it far more affordable for people to do the buyout. And unfortunately, the worldwide board said, no. The pricing is inelastic. These people have got nowhere else to go, etc. And I didn't believe in that, and I ended up leaving. And 4 years after that, the business was in negative territory.
Wow.
So in one 4-year period, you go from 9 million
Massive
EBIT
growth
to 25 million EBIT.
And it's reversed.
And in 4 years, it went to minus 1 million.
Incredible.
Yeah. And of course, what didn't help, and Nigel, you know how I operate, the managing director who took over from me never left his office. Meetings, and more meetings. Didn't care about the people in the field, etc. And the whole culture and everything else of the organisation just declined at a rapid rate. Anyway, I went off to join Ruralco in the rural sector. And it was a member cooperative that had become a publicly unlisted company. And the original company, Combined Rural Traders, had bought another one called Town and Country, and they brought them both together under the Ruralco banner. Now, the managing director who was before me was very much an accountant. And every Monday he would get these massive reports on his desk that he would go through and look at all the various figures, etc. Anyway, I came along. One of the first things I did was go to the CFO and say, Frank, just give me a one-pager of all this stuff. I just don't have the time. Get out, visit members, do all of that. Cutting a long story short, during the next 10 years, what we did was really position 2 brands in the market. One was CRT for the big farmers, and the other one was to recognise that there was a growing market of hobby farmers. And that was really what Town and Country was all about.
Right, okay. Yep.
And mind you, there were a lot of people there who thought, oh no, this, and you had to get some people to drag them screaming into the more hobby farm market. I remember one sad case where I said to a guy, the market has changed around you. There's no more broadacre cropping or, beef farms, etc. This is all about mums and dads, 5-acre blocks. No. This is the way the business has always been. The business eventually went broke. The people who bought out the business, a couple of young guys, what did they do? They turned it into a hobby farm market store and did extremely well.
Yeah.
So, again, there's something about reinventing yourself, not only your business, but to reinvent your business, you've got to reinvent yourself and look at what it is, etc.
Yeah.
We then also recognise that what was the business? Oh, and my apologies. Just back to Thorn for a moment.
Yep.
The other string of it was recognising that Thorn wasn't just radio rentals or a consumer rental business. It was a finance business.
Yeah.
So therefore we started Thorn Business Services, and that was a fantastic part of the business. Anyway, moving back to Ruralco, it was to stand back and say, what are we really? Oh, well, independent member group of independent rural merchants.
Mm.
Well, why can't we be an independent member group of a whole range of rural services? So we took a leaf out of Wesfarmers and Elders and then started to develop the business on all these other platforms. At the same time, what we did was absolutely change the whole logistics offering to members.
I was going to say, I mean,
one
you've got
thing
the
that
infrastructure then.
did surprise a lot of people was that the old model, when I joined, actually helped overinflate the support of big members. So we would have small members saying, well, this isn't right. I can buy cheaper off this big member than I can buy directly off you. Yeah, because we were paying these members such big rebates. That they were making so much margin, they could sell to the smaller members. And it might sound quite counterintuitive. But after a lot of hard work, etc., we actually said goodbye to a lot of those big members and concentrated on the small members. We were never going to be able to keep everybody happy. And it was one of the best decisions we could have possibly made. And the business just grew because we were able to do more for those small members. And then we developed into wool and livestock. We developed into real estate. And the business just grew. Now, in 1996, when I joined,
I mean, sorry, John, to cut in there. That's an amazing story, to be honest. I mean, the diversification of the business, it went from being, I'm not going to say lazy, but sort of just, doing what it would normally consider as its core business, and then saying, okay, well, here's an opportunity for us we see a problem, we can reinvent ourselves now. And you've got the infrastructure, you've got the contacts, you've got all of the cost structure in place to, once you sort of got rid of that proverbial monkey off the back, so to speak, you are able to then say, okay, well, let's branch into some more interesting areas, grow the business, grow essentially the diversify the revenue streams. I mean, that's incredible.
And one of the things, I use the old analogy of peeling back an onion. To look at a business like an onion, peel it back. What's our real core competencies? What are we good at? Right?
So if it's logistics, how can we diversify?
How can we build on those? And it's something that so many businesses, like recognising that Thorn was a finance company, recognising that Ruralco could be this whole suite of services delivered by independent members. And from 1992, Ruralco was one of 21 rural merchandising groups. In the end, we were one of only 3 or 4, I think it was, when I left in 2006. But even further on, it ended up being only one of the big 3. And then it got absorbed by Nutrien. And is really one of the big 2. Nutrien just sucked a number of them up in the market, and go from being worth $9 million in 96 to being worth around $150 million in 2006 as a publicly listed company.
Amazing. Yep.
Yeah, fertilizer. How we got public listing is we did a reverse takeover of a company called Growforce, which was very, very strong in fertilizer.
They're public already. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So
amazing.
It's about looking at things differently. Anyway, after 10 years, I retired from Ruralco because there was a merger, and I got to tell you, I was tired. 10 years of doing work with independent members. It's tough.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's
all
a
the
bit
politics.
and I mean this in the nicest possible way. It's a bit like herding cats.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? Your greatest strength of the business, the independent members. The greatest weakness, trying to get them all to think in one direction. And, it is tough. But if I can just touch on one other thing within that, made a significant amount of difference to the business and its culture. When I came in, it was management versus the members. So I took a leaf out of the book of McDonald's, and a guy, Peter Ritchie, real doyen of the industry, and formed the member groups around Australia. And what we did was regional business development groups, state business development groups, and a national business development group. And your regional chair would sit on the state committee, and the state committees would sit on state committee chairs would sit on the national committee, and the chair of the national committee would sit on the board.
Makes sense to break up the power structure and the decision-making process.
No, it actually created a better power structure.
Better unity. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll tell you an interesting example. I can remember one particular case. There had been this member of New South Wales who hadn't been playing ball. And I got a request from our general manager, not a request from him, through him. He came in and he said, "You're not going to believe it." He said, "This group in New South Wales want to get rid of this member." And I said, "Why?" They said, "Well, he's not coming to meetings and he's not getting involved in the marketing and he's not doing this and he's not doing that." And I said, "Well, Greg, I think you've got to kind of calm them down, etc., and see what they can do, put their arms around him, say, 'Listen, mate, da-da-da-da-da.'"
Yep.
And he said, "Yeah." He said, "You want to know the interesting part?" I said, "What?" He said, "Go back before we had this structure, and if I'd have gone and talked to that member, I would have been the worst person in the whole world. Now that the members have the power, they're giving the guy so much grief and just want to get rid of him out of the organisation." So it was a whole different change of attitude.
Yeah.
And
it's good, isn't it?
And empowerment of the members themselves.
Yeah.
So after 10 years with Ruralco, I was going to retire and become a non-executive director. And I got a phone call saying, "John, would you like a trip back to the future?" I said, "What with?" They said, "Well, Thorn got taken out by a private equity firm." I said, "Yeah." They said, "Well, they'd like you to come back, take the company public, and you can do with it what you always wanted to." I said, "Oh, okay."
Let's go.
There was toing and throwing negotiations. I rejoined, and part of it, they said, "We want to take the company public." And I said, "Okay, by when?" And this is September. "Oh, by Christmas." "You want to take the company public by Christmas?" Right, okay.
Well, there's your first challenge.
Massive. Fortunately, when I was at Grace Brothers, I did part-time mainly a Bachelor of Commerce degree, majoring in accounting and finance, etc.
Right.
Why that happened was I spoke to Roger Corbet and Michael Grace one day, and they were saying to me, "Well, Hughesy, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I'd like one of your jobs, right?" And as directors of Grace Brothers, they said, "Well, you better get off your behind and go and finish the university degree you never did." And I said, "Oh, in marketing?" They said, "No, you learn marketing in the real world. Go and do accounting and finance, because every business comes down to dollars and cents on the bottom line."
Yeah.
And it was great experience, particularly when you get into managing a public company.
Of course.
Anyway, so rejoin Thorn. One of the first things was to get out the stores. So I had a chat to our then general manager of radio rental, and I said, "I want to go out and visit some stores. Let's hit the road tomorrow." So he comes along, 3-piece suit, BMW, file a fax. I roll up in a store manager's uniform. We go out to store, and he walks in and he's going through his KPIs and everything else. And I said, "Yeah, can we just put that aside?" I said, "Who'd like a cup of coffee?" Go and buy a cup of coffee for everybody. Come back into the store, a few little cakes, etc. "Okay, now tell me what's wrong with the business." And people are just looking at you like, "Hang on, this guy's the boss, and he wants to actually
listen."
100%. Breaking down barriers of
is
that
important.
business were hard. By the way, that general manager was made redundant a week later because I thought, I know this business better than anybody.
Yeah.
I want a flat structure. I'm going to spend vast amount of time out there in stores, listening, learning, etc.
Being a sponge,
And
basically, just absorbing all of the issues.
Again, like the Ken Wolfendale and
Ian.
Ian, Ken and Ian. The thing there, learning from the people that are doing the job and have the experience, etc. What's worked, what hasn't worked, etc. One of the biggest learnings was when I was talking to some delivery guys. I said, "What's your biggest beef?" They said, "Oh, if we go out there with multiple units, say we've got 5 units to deliver." I said, "Yeah." They said, "We've got to get 15 signatures, 3 per product."
You run out of ink by the end of the day.
I said, you can't be serious.
He's got a box of biros and he's trying.
Anyway, I called a meeting of the executive and everybody had blamed the lawyers. So get the lawyers in, sit them in a room, and I shut and locked the door. And I said, no one is leaving until we sort this out, because it's absolutely ridiculous. And I turned to the 2 lawyers, couple of good guys.
You got a hostage situation.
Yeah. I said, and it's all your fault. What? Went through the whole thing. I said, now that's the problem. They said, well, nobody's asked us to fix it. They've just asked us for new different contracts and everything else.
So they didn't even know about the problem. Yeah.
I said, well, how long is it going to take to fix it? Oh, we could have some new contracts drawn up by this time next week.
So you left him in there for a week.
No matter how many units were delivered or whatever, and from signature in store to delivery, that whole exercise was only 3 signatures.
Yeah, so much better customer experience, hands down. I mean,
correct. But the frustration of the people, in store. One of the other funny things about rejoining Thorn, imagine that I'd left Ruralco and we'd invested a whole lot of money in IT, to the point at that time in 2006, a member could literally do everything online, no paperwork, all their rebates, everything. An interesting part of that as well, not only great for them, but if anybody ever decided to leave, we'd say, okay, well, we've got to take our system back. And they'd say, but all of our information is on the system. So, yeah, but you want to leave, so you got to go and buy yourself another system.
Have second thoughts then.
Yeah. Anyway, so
another hostage situation.
I rejoined Thorn, right?
Yeah.
Consumer electronics, dealing with the likes of Panasonic and NEC and everybody else.
Toshiba, yeah.
Yeah, and I saw somebody putting faxer. I said, what are you doing? They said, we're faxing off orders. Hang on. Yeah, what?
Yeah.
It was so interesting. The consumer electronics industry was so far behind.
Yeah. Talk about digital transformation. I mean, it's there, isn't it? Paperless.
Yeah.
Faxing, get rid of that. God.
At that time, Thorn, again, was very low in value. And in fact, its value when we took it to market was $50 million. Okay. 8 years later, when I left, it was over 300 million. Now, what was
because they stopped faxing, did they?
Sorry, stopped faxing. That's exactly right. And a few other things.
Yeah, just a few.
When I joined and I spoke to a few people about the culture of the organisation, I heard an interesting story that one of the international heads of the private equity group that owned Thorn had come out to Australia and said to the then management team, well, how would you describe the culture? And his words were, well, probably a bit of fear and directness. Oh, well, if it works. I mean, it was just terrible.
That's crazy.
Really, really terrible.
Yeah.
And people at stores hated seeing anybody from head office because it was all about driving KPIs and everything else. And some of the ways that they were treated in management meetings were absolutely horrible. And I'd heard stories about people vomiting before going into a review meeting, etc. It was something that shouldn't be done.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, a guy that you knew well, James Marshall,
Yep.
promoted him to national ops manager, and he did an absolutely brilliant job. And together, God only knows how many stores we visited and the time we spent at stores. One of the first things I did was to tell everybody to go out and buy a barbecue, so that at least once a week they'd have a barbecue breakfast at store. If James and I were travelling around and it was the first store of the day, we'd be there at 7 o'clock in the morning and we cooked the barbecue. If it was morning tea time, we'd buy, we could put on a lot of weight because we'd buy lunches, we'd buy morning teas, afternoon teas,
Next door, another barbecue.
But if you want to create a different culture, you don't just wander into a store. You go in there and you do something different. Okay?
That's right. And they appreciate it too. The smell of a bacon egg roll in the morning is nothing better.
Oh,
boss, you're the best.
Or, a cream bun or whatever for afternoon tea, the whole bit. Pizzas for lunch, which was the norm, etc. And one of the other things that we did when James and I were going around was that if we went into a store and we were found it was getting hammered, we would clean a fridge. We would help serve customers.
Help out, yeah.
We would hop on a delivery truck. And you don't have to do that too many times before the word gets around to the organisation that things are different.
Yeah, like to be hands-on.
And people care. And sending out birthday wishes. If somebody did 5-year, 10-year or whatever, I'd personally call them and, thank them for the job that they were doing, etc. And the number of times I'd talk to, say, a field rep or a delivery driver, I think they nearly run off the road. I've got the boss is ringing, etc. And by the way, nobody ever called me Mr. Hughes, as you'll remember. It was always John.
John, yeah, yep.
Yep. Sometimes they call me, hey, boss, which is nice. But you do that, and then they tell somebody else, and it just starts to build such a good, positive culture.
Yeah, and you attract good talent too. People who tell other people they might want to come and work for you, and you end up with a good fleet of really good people that love the business as much as you do.
Yeah, and if things get tight and you need help, etc.
Yeah, they dig down, dig deep.
They will say, "I've been treated right." I've been given this. I used up all my holidays because my kid was sick or whatever else, and my sick leave, etc.
Yep.
There's been an issue in the family, but they've just given me this extra 1 week. Well, that's great. It just enforces the positive culture. So does.
Yeah.
And you were the recipient of an occasional Mars bar or Kit Kat with me walking around.
Delicious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Walk out of Coles or Woolies with these big bags.
No, I remember you carrying those big bags of lollies around.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone loved it. No, it was good. It was a nice touch.
Even just going around to the office with a cup of coffee and sitting on the corner of somebody's desk and saying, how are you going? Tell me what you're doing. How are you enjoying things, etc. And that does build a really positive culture.
Yeah.
And you get it back in spades. The really sad thing about Thorn later on, and it really hit after I left, was that we had done so much for so many hundreds of thousands of consumers out there that consumer action groups and ASIC, etc., really took a dislike to consumer leasing and have literally legislated Thorn and every other rental business out of the market. And these are people who are credit and cash constrained. They don't have 2 bob at the end of the month. They have got bad credit, and no one is going to touch them, let alone people say, oh, but it's so easy to get, a credit account at Harvey Norman or whatever. Garbage.
Yeah, it's not true.
It is not true.
Yeah.
And the number of customers I personally saw who would come in and they'd been in a difficult situation and they were just so thankful. One lady I remember from Cranbourne in Melbourne, who Saturday morning, and I was serving her, and just to take a payment actually, And I said, "Oh, you've been a customer for a long time." She said, "Yeah." She said, "You know what? If it wasn't for radio rentals, I wouldn't have anything today." She said, "I was a single mum.
Yep.
I had to get out of an abusive relationship with 2 small kids.
Mm.
And the only business that would help me was radio rentals."
Mm. And
And
it feels good. I mean, as the managing director of the business, I mean, you've got purpose. I mean, you're helping
yeah,
people who don't have options.
correct.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know much about the legislation and as you say that with ASIC and whatever else, but what I do know and what I have experienced is that sometimes just they don't understand people are fragile. They just think of the broader picture, or they've got some idea in their head that they shouldn't exist, and they just go for it. I just it doesn't for me. I don't understand why they would legislate something like radio rentals out of business. To me, it doesn't make any sense.
They didn't understand it.
Mm.
I had Channel 7 Today Tonight contact me once about doing an interview.
Mm.
I said, "Yeah, sure, come in." And my executive team were like, "You what? You've got to be kidding me."
Yeah, I could picture it.
Anyway, I had them in for about an hour and a half, I think,
Yeah.
and the guy in my office and the cameraman, etc. And after going through and what we did and talking about the mum test, which I'll cover off in a moment, I said, "Well, how was that?" And the reporter said, "It won't be going to air." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, there's nothing here." I said, "But there's a good story." He said, "Yeah, but we weren't after a good story."
No, they wanted the bad PR. Yeah, the stuff that goes viral.
They were
back
trying
then,
to catch me out.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And they said, "There's just not a story here." And as the camera guy walked out, he said, "Mate, you guys are doing a great job." He said, "I never understood."
Yeah. Yeah. It was misunderstood, I think, wasn't it, really? When you think about it. I mean, I after working there for a while, I mean, I realized how much the business was helping people, genuinely helping people, that are in these sticky situations that don't want to buy a second-hand one off, what would be Facebook Marketplace or something. Now they actually want something of quality. They need it. They have a certain need, but that just don't have the means in which to financially get to whatever it is. Correct. It could be a child going to, TAFE or whatever, and they need a certain type of laptop. They just can't afford it. It's not, everybody thinks that, you can just go buy one or just get one off a friend or it's secondhand or whatever, but it doesn't work like that. The people who need and, take pride in the things they own as well. I mean, it comes down to that. Yeah. It's really sad,
By the way,
isn't it?
when I came back, I found that they'd walked away from RentTryBuy. So it was also reinventing that. It was also saying that, well, they'd walked away from Thorn Business Services. We reinvented that. Then we did Cash First, which was cash loans, because, again, we looked at the business and said, hey, it's a finance company. Right? And went down that path. A really important thing that I touched on a moment ago was the mum test that James Marshall came up with, which was telling stores to do, if you've got a customer who's in trouble, do for them what you would do for your mum. Or if you're talking to your mum tonight, that you can be proud of whatever you've done for that customer. And the number of stories that we had as positives from stores, I remember one I think I've spoken to you about before up in Maryborough, and the store manager up there rang me nearly in tears that there was this older couple and it upgraded a year or so ago, etc. And the husband had died. And I said, "Oh, that's terribly sad." I said, "So what did you do?" She said, "Well, boss, I hope you don't mind." She said, "I wrote off the TV and I took them around a bunch of flowers."
That's so nice. Great. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You just don't get that anymore.
No. I mean, what that did for her, the staff, and of course every store in Queensland knew the story within 24 hours. And people were saying, "But can we really do something like that?" Well, in the exceptional circumstances of this old lady in her 80s who's been a customer for 20 or 30 years or whatever and upgrading, and she'd done RentTryBuy so many times, it's about loyalty.
That's exactly right.
If I'd have been still with Thorn and with James when he took over from me when I retired, unfortunately due to my wife's health, and he'd have been CEO and I'd have been chair, I reckon we would have beaten ASIC, because there was a case of ASIC versus Westpac where the judge said there's really nothing wrong here because there's no defaults, the arrears and everything's so low.
Yep.
We would have been able to present, in my view, an extremely strong case to say we are not overcommitting customers. We are not taking advantage of customers. And how many companies in the world, finance companies, have something like the mum test? And we could have showed example after example after example.
I mean, what options do they have? Go to some sort of crazy loan shark with pay super crazy interest rates and, I mean.
Oh, by the way, they allowed what do you call it? Buy now, pay laters. Into the market. Who just thumbed their noses and found a nice little way to get into the market. And I think it created massive issues. Just sad how things go. So that's so much of my journey, etc. But looking at other businesses, etc., and what they've done in Reinvention, one of the best examples I could give would be of LG. Now, when they came into the market in the 90s, it wasn't LG, of course, it was Lucky Gold Star. And bloody lucky
I
if
actually
they
had a
were.
Lucky Gold Star TV.
Oh, we didn't cover off Big Brown Box, which I'll come off.
Oh yeah, we could. Maybe at the end.
Is that LG or Lucky Gold Star completely reinvented itself.
Yes, it was an amazing rebranding.
Yeah,
incredible.
And there have been a number of others around the world that reinvent. And you have to keep consumers. To keep your brand relevant to consumers, you've got to keep reinventing. You look at a group called Accent, which started off as Athlete's Foot. And their expansions and new brands and everything else.
Younger demographics.
Look at Lavissa as a brand. Absolutely brilliant.
Lavissa?
In the jewelry.
I mean, and the margins would be phenomenal. I mean, that must be and that's always packed. Every time I go past one, I mean, I've got 3 daughters. So, I mean, as soon as we walk past them, they're immediately in there buying earrings and the quality of the stuff is really good, like compared to going and spending, $1,000 on a set of, gold earrings. I'd rather just go in there and buy, So they've really got this market of this sort of teenage to early adult kind of young adult market. It's such a great business, that.
And look, you've got to look as a retailer how you do remain relevant. One of the other ones that I would quickly mention, Nordstrom in America. Their upgraded stores, their new store in Honolulu from a few years old now, one of the first things they put in was a bar and cafe, etc. Why? Wives go shopping and the guys go to the bar. What can be better than that?
Oh, mate, it frustrates me when I go with my wife. We go to Parramatta Westfields, for example, and you see all these lonely guys just walking around waiting for their wives to finish shopping. But there's nothing for them to do. I mean, there's empty space in the middle of that Westfields. John, I think you need to go there and tell them what to do with that space, mate. Reinvent it. Everybody just walks around looking at each other, lost.
And look, the other thing that's really important in Australian retail is the category killers. And I've said to you, from me, I'm not offering anybody advice, but the only retailers that my wife and I invest in are the category killers, who really know how to drive businesses.
JB, let me guess. Is that one?
Oh, JB Hi-Fi. You've got Harvey Norman. You've got Bunnings and Officeworks. And there's another Super Cheap Auto. Started out as Super Cheap Auto. Now
that's
it's got
a great
Rebel,
business.
BCF. Gangbuster businesses. Who the hell's going to compete with them?
No, well, that's right. I mean, I look at, in the automotive space, when you look at like Auto One, for example, and it's what you walk in these stores and they're almost like a desert compared to, when it comes to customers compared to the super cheap stores. They're always got specials
Spotlight.
on. They've always got, they're a bit of a vibe in the store. It feels really
Mm.
good when you walk in. Lots of stuff on the shelves. It's packed. It feels like a bit of a bargains bazaar sometimes. When you walk in and you're looking for
Yeah.
things. I think they're merchandising those stores really well.
And a really interesting thing is that they employ people who have a passion for motor cars.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, John, because my local one, there's a lady working there, and she's in her probably late 60s, and she's a grandmother, and I was talking to her, and I thought she's not going to know any. Mate, she knew more about cars than I did.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've pulled motors apart myself and worked on cars, and like.
But isn't that wonderful?
Oh, it's amazing. It was so good. Yeah.
There is a great company in America that people should look up called Tractor Supply Company that a mate of mine, Joe Scarlett, reinvented from being literally a tractor supply company to America's biggest hobby farm store, hobby farm business. It's now worth about $45 billion. It's one of the most successful NASDAQ shares with continual growth, etc. Something they're heading towards 3,000 stores.
Wow.
And they're America's biggest seller of ride-on lawnmowers, and I'm talking hundreds of thousands.
Oh, and then the Americans love their big blocks and ride-on mowers and things. It's just... Yeah. Now they've got electric coming in too, so they're going to reinvent themselves when it comes to that market as well, isn't it? It's incredible.
All of that. But, you look at those category killers. Now, just to finish, and I realise that we've gone way over time.
I'm fine, John. If you have to go, but I'm fine.
Oh no, I was worried about trying to keep it to an hour.
No. I can cut some stuff out. No, this is great. We'll just keep going. There's no time limit. Yeah, that's the great thing about podcasts.
Well, yeah, the big brown box.
Yes,
that you saw firsthand.
Yeah, I did.
Looking at the radio rentals business in itself, separate from the other streams of Thorn, was about what have we got? Great relationships with suppliers. We've got all these stores scattered around Australia. We've got pretty good IT systems, etc. Online's starting to grow. Why don't we start a totally separate business being online retail? Now, in those days, the manufacturers used to carry a lot of stock.
Yep.
So we came up with the idea, what we will do is have this website and people could go online there, look at all these products, order it. We'd push the order through to the manufacturer. The manufacturer would then deliver it to one of our radio rental stores. And, of course, we had the fleet of trucks or to one of our metropolitan distribution centres. And then we would just deliver it straight out to the customers.
It was a great idea. It was an amazing idea, to be honest. And when you say online was starting to take off, I mean, I think I can chime in there and just say, like, just the idea of taking that and what is essentially, your relationships, your suppliers, your infrastructure, and all those synergies, and then spinning up a business that would be online at that point. Now, this was early, what was it, 2009 or 10?
Oh, yeah, 2009, 10, around that time.
Around that time, right? Yeah. So, I mean, there weren't many out there. There was only a handful, like maybe a few that were actually doing it. So that was really at the forefront of online retail.
Yeah, and were other retailers happy? Nope.
Yeah, well, they didn't really have an online store. They didn't have an online presence, really. It was more catalog based.
Actually, it was a bit earlier than that because it was before the GFC.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And what happened with the GFC is that suppliers started to really cut back on stocks and they got to just in time. And then basically retailers were told, well, if you don't order enough volume, we're not going to carry your safety stock.
Yeah.
So what you order is what you get, et cetera, et cetera. And we didn't have the capacity. And as a startup, we didn't really know what would be the numbers that we could do, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, a lot of unknowns. It was 2008, I think I joined.
For us to invest millions and millions of dollars in warehouses and take a punt. I mean, interestingly, we did give some orders or what were they called? Reserve stocks
Mm.
to suppliers. But interestingly, when we went to draw down on those, they'd been accidentally sold or there was something wrong within the system.
Yeah. No.
And one can only potentially think that maybe there were some other things, not that I'm a conspiracy theorist, of
No.
course, but,
Mm.
you know, if you're a major supplier, where's your bread buttered? And it's not on trying
Start
to
an online
help some
business.
little startup.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they were major brands too. To be able to bring those major brands to an online store, it was just it was very, very like new territory, new ground.
Absolutely.
And that's why I joined, actually, because I just saw the potential. It had such potential to grow into something massive, especially with the Radio Rentals fleet of trucks. As you say, the Radio Rentals brand was so strong with its stores, its delivery processes, its systems as well were very, very solid. It had all of the hallmarks of what would have been an amazing business and a super successful business. But as you say, GFC and everything else kind of killed that idea pretty quickly, unfortunately, with stock holdings and things.
Yeah, well,
not being there.
The one that did work well was John Winning.
He used the winnings business basically as a springboard.
He went off. I think his dad might have had a few doubts about this, etc. And other people within the winnings organisations, but he got the go-ahead to start appliances online.
Yeah.
And he did a cracker job.
Yeah, he did.
And in fact, he bought the Big Brown Box brand off us.
Yeah.
But the advantage that he had, he could draw down on winning stock.
Yeah, exactly.
So the big issue that we had, and they had the buying power, they had the stock. He just needed to start the online.
Yeah.
And he's a great business person, right? And I've really loved seeing his success. And he's now, of course, the CEO, managing director of the Winnings Group.
That's right. Yeah. Well, it was brown. Big Brown Box was mainly focused on brown goods for the listeners out there, where the Winnings Group and appliances online was mainly white goods. Correct. So he wanted to diversify a lot into the TVs and or streaming players and all that kind of stuff, and he didn't really have those relationships. But by doing that, by acquiring Big Brown Box, he immediately had. I think there was still quite a few customers as well. So he'd not only got the business, the website, he also got all of these new customers that were basically profiled around brown goods.
It is all about reinvention. One of the other things I didn't mention is we're now in the fortunate position where we can concentrate on philanthropy.
Yeah. So that's a good segue, John, into the Dove's Nest Foundation and the work you've been doing. I mean, it'd be great if we could dive into that.
The one that came before Dove's Nest Foundation was the Children's Tumour Foundation.
The Tumour. Yeah.
My mum had a disease called neurofibromatosis, which means that tumours can grow anywhere on your body, inside, outside, or whatever.
Right.
Imagine that you and your wife went along to a paediatrician and they say, well, the little learning issues and these lumps and the cafe au lait spots, etc. Well, your daughter's got NF. Now, what's that? Neurofibromatosis. And these tumours can grow anywhere. Probably around 67% chance they're going to have learning difficulties. Could result in blindness, deafness, a whole host of different issues because of where the tumours grow. They say, okay, well, what about treatments? Well, there's very few. Cure? No. How are we going to know what's going to happen? Well, you won't. You just got to monitor it. So, in other words, we're living with a time bomb. Yes.
That's horrible.
Now, imagine that.
Yeah.
And what was really, really struck me was that my mum had showed no signs of any lumps or whatever. during her youth or first years of marriage. My sister was born, nothing. I'm born, and all of a sudden my mum starts to just bloom in these external tumours, etc.
It's terrible.
And it was just devastating, you know, and it's one of those things where people look at you and they want to cross the side of the street or whatever else.
Yeah.
And then eventually what led to her death was that a number of them started to grow internally to her. One of them, which they didn't pick up early enough, grew to the size, a very, very large size in a hip, ate all the hip away, etc. They couldn't operate because she would have bled out in the operating table, and she passed at just 70 years of age. Terribly sad, very, very young.
That is sad, yeah, and young. Yep.
And I vowed at that time that I would try and do something if I ever could to help others. A little bit as a legacy to her.
Yeah.
So when I got into a better financial position and I was back with Thorn, etc., I got involved with an organisation called Neurofibromatosis Association of Australia, and looked at it and thought, okay. And the only money keeping the doors open was the last cheque I'd written out a couple of months before, which helped pay for the lady who was working 20 hours a week, and its offices were out of the Ku-ring-gai senior citizens at Ku-ring-gai. And thinking, oh my God. And the organisation in Queensland had closed, the one in Victoria had, wasn't one in WA, the South Australian one was struggling, you know, etc. So anyway, I put on my CEO hat and thought, we've got to do something with this.
Time to reinvent it.
Reinvent it. Yeah. And fortunately, I was in the position as CEO of Thorn to be able to help, and got stuck in. And we found that there was this organisation in America called Children's Tumour Foundation. And I met the guy who would really help reinvent that.
Yep.
And I said, why did you come up with that name? He said, well, John, I call it the 30-second lift ride.
All right.
You get into a lift or you get to talk to somebody about what you're doing in your organisation. You've got 30 seconds to make an impression. He said, you start to talk about the Neurofibromatosis Association of America, and they can't even pronounce it, let alone give you enough time to talk about it. You say to them, well, I'm chairman of the Children's Tumour Foundation. Oh, what's that?
Opens doors straight away, doesn't it? Yeah.
Opens doors straight away.
Yep.
And then many people I've given a 1-minute patter to, and they say, oh my God, how can I help? And you might remember some of the things that we did in fundraising and everything else.
Yeah, yep.
And fortunately, suppliers supported it enormously, which I could go on to another topic called sphere of influence. Yeah. Because whilst you're the CEO of a public company and suppliers are getting these really, really big orders, they love you, they'll do anything for you. When you retire, they take longer to return phone calls, and the $1,000 donations go down to $500, and then you can become a cranky old man and you say, I've been chairman for 10 years, I'm out of here.
Yeah, the law of process.
It's just part of life.
Yes,
but I've been very proud taking the Children's Tumour Foundation from nothing to where it's a national organisation supporting, you know, hundreds of families, etc., because support is so important in this. Go back to the thing of you and your wife and your daughter going along to the doctor, etc. And you think, you go home, your guts and your heart have been ripped out of you.
Yeah.
What do we do? But the doctor has given you a pamphlet to contact the Children's Tumour Foundation, and you ring there and there's this really lovely lady who will
makes a massive
talk
difference
to you for an hour.
Massive difference, yeah.
Tell you about other families, connect you with other families who can give you support.
Yep.
You know, and
it's
talk
huge.
to you about the NF clinic.
Yep.
In your state, you know, whatever. And
yep.
the only thing is that it's the whole charity sector, not-for-profit sector.
Yep.
There's so many. I mean, there's like over 60,000 people trying to raise funds.
Right.
So just trying to get enough. And fortunately, Robbie and I are in a position to help enormously, plus our friends and contacts, etc.
Yep.
Plus other very, very good-hearted people getting on board. And yeah, but it's a really, really tough road.
Is the foundation still running today?
Yes, it is.
I'll be sure to leave a link on the website and on the show notes for those listening. If you want to make a donation, they can jump
Please
on
do.
and donate. It sounds like an amazing organisation, and I know exactly what you're talking about. That pamphlet at the end, and when my mother got lung cancer, we were sitting looking at each other when Mum got the diagnosis, and one of the ladies from the hospital walked over and said, "Give this lady a call from the Cancer Council. She's amazing." And just being able to have somebody there to call, they've experienced it before. They know what the emotions that you're going through. As you say, your heart gets ripped out. It's shock. You go through all those patterns of emotion. Yeah, that's right. And it's just so. Yeah, I encourage everybody listening to the podcast to jump on and help out the foundation. I mean, it sounds like you guys are doing amazing work.
No, and then once I retired, well, even before I retired, my wife and I set up the Dove's Nest Foundation, which is our family charity.
Yeah, okay.
And every year we do a review who we're helping, what their work, what's the money achieving, etc. Because in the not-for-profit sector, you've got to be conscious of not just writing out a check and saying, it's about, well, what are they doing? Are they meeting their commitments? You know, are they achieving all the stuff?
Yeah.
So we do that, but there's been some very, very long-term relationships, and a lot of them to more orphan diseases like donkey shelter.
Okay, I've heard of that. Yeah.
The orangutans in Borneo. So if you ever get the chance to go up there and visit those, etc.
Amazing
absolutely
work. Yes.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much again for your time. And thanks for talking to the audience today. It was good seeing you again. I haven't seen you for a while. So you're looking really, really well. So
thank you.
Thanks so much, mate.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care, mate. Bye-bye.